Hi, my name is Dr. Sandy Chang. I am a physician scientist at Yale University Medical School. As a physician, I see patients and see patient cases, and also as a scientist, I run a lab and work on research related to cancer and aging biology. I've been doing this since, I guess as an undergraduate at Yale in 1984, I started doing science research and haven't stopped. Okay, so I think I've been interested in science all throughout my life. I'm a very avid amateur astronomer since I was like 7 years old. I got a telescope as a present when I was in the 4th grade, and I did a lot of astronomy on my own. This is my hobby. And I always thought I was going to be an astronomer until college time in the 80s, when actually the field of astronomy, professional astronomy, was really in the doldrums. People were getting laid off. And then I got also interested in molecular biology, which really blossomed like in the middle of the 80s. So because of these interests, I went and pursued a degree in biophysics and biochemistry at Yale. And at Yale, I worked in several labs to further my research interests. I worked in a lab on trypanosome biology, in which we looked at this parasite called a trypanosome, which causes African sleeping sickness. And we try to understand the molecular biology of how these parasites evade the host immune system, which was fascinating. And another project I did when I was a student at Yale was that we looked at a set of genes called the Hox genes, or the homeobox genes. And these are the genes that actually specify pattern formation in an organism. So I worked in a lab with Dr. Frank Rutto, who was a foremost authority on this type of analysis. And we actually cloned the oldest vertebrate Hox gene when I was a student. So that was kind of cool. So after my research experience at Yale, I decided I wanted to do an MD PhD program. So an MD PhD program combines my interest in research, which is the PhD part, and also my interest in clinical medicine, which is the MD part. So there are these programs around which I think all of you should consider if you're interested in both research and medicine. It's a 7-year program. It's all expense paid, so it's great. You don't come out with any debt. And you emerge with a really firm understanding of human disease and also the mechanism of human diseases by studying a disease component as part of your research. So I went into the Cornell Rockefeller MD PhD program. That's a very nice program at New York City, where I'm from. And I work in a lab, immunology lab, studying actually a gene called MARX, which is a gene that's involved in signal transduction in macrophages, and obviously mutations in this gene will cause immune diseases. And my medical school was at Cornell, so it was very nice. Cornell and Rockefeller was only a block apart, so I did my medical studies and then walked over to Rockefeller and did my research studies. So it was nice to combine the two. And I guess the challenging part of my career so far has been the funding situation. So as you probably know, it's not the greatest time to do basic science research because the government has just been cutting back a lot of the funds. So right now, I have to say, I'm very glad that I'm an MD PhD because my physician part, I could do a little bit more on the physician side to maybe do more patient cases and things like that, which helps pay for some of the costs in my lab. So which is really nice to have multiple things that you do. And also teach Yale undergrads as well. Encourage all of you young students looking at this video not to be discouraged. It's too early for you guys to be discouraged. You should just continue doing science, go into the labs that you wanted to go into. And then even if you don't wind up being a scientist, it's okay. The training that you get by learning how to do science, it's going to be invaluable for whatever career you take. So I think that the rigorous quantitative training that you get as a scientist or being trained as a scientist is invaluable. You can major in the sciences and then go to Wall Street or something, do whatever you want. You don't necessarily have to wind up being a scientist, but there are many pathways that you could take. You could be a scientist, you could be a physician scientist, or you could do something non-scientific, but use the rigor of your training for that career. So as a high school student, I went into actually 2 labs to work. I went to the Bronx High School of Science, and we have a program in which we got out of school early, and in the afternoons we could actually take the subway to a New York City lab and work in a lab. And they encouraged us to do all these science fairs, and I did many of them, and including the Westinghouse Science Talent Search, which is now called Intel. So the way I would recommend you approaching the lab is don't be shy. Go to whatever university they say you want to work in. Go to a department and look up all the list of professors. See what research that they do interests you, and email the professor. What I would recommend is that you read a couple of papers by the professor, at least a review article. I mean, as a high school student, you may not understand everything that's in the paper, but at least make an attempt to understand what the professor is reading. I had this one student come to my lab with a stack of my papers, having read them all, and I was so impressed. I was like, okay, you're in my lab. So if you could impress the professors by at least reading their papers, or one or two of their papers, and at least have an intelligent conversation about their research, that opens a lot of doors. Second is you want to make sure that you have an adequate amount of time to do research. Like don't go into research you have like all these AP exams or something, or you have all these projects that you have to do. Dedicate a summer or two, actually 2 summers, I would say, to do the research unencumbered by other activities. I would go into a lab junior year of high school and work junior year and senior year summers. Okay, so spend 2 summers in the lab, and that way in your senior year, you can apply, if you have enough data, you should apply for Intel, for Siemens, and for ISF. These things will be really instrumental, even if you don't win, it doesn't matter. The process of writing up a paper, submitting it is really invaluable. You have to do this as a scientist writing for grants all the time. And if you do win, that is a huge plus for getting to any of the colleges. I mean, I work in Yale admissions, and we specifically target kids who have submitted papers to these organizations, Siemens, ISF, Intel, and we recruit Intel winners. Even if you're a semifinalist, we recruit as well. That demonstrates that you have a dedication. You worked in the lab for 2 years, but you were able to take your project, write it up, submit it, and win. And I think that's fantastic. And as an aside, I was actually a 2nd place winner in my year's Westinghouse Science Talent Search. Was very prestigious, was great. Also gave me some money to come to a place like Yale.